Whereas the reality is, like I said, the value is created in augmentation. Humans first, AI second, AI in service. AI is a tool. How do you use it? And when do you use it? So every business leader, the first question they should ask themselves, is AI the right tool to address this problem today?
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is David De Cremer. David is the Dean of the DeMoore McKim School of Business at Northeastern University and a professor in management and technology at the university. He's also the founder and former director of the Center on AI Technology for Humankind at the National University of Singapore Business School. David's also the former chair in management studies at Judge Business School at the University of Cambridge. David's also a member of EY's advisory board guiding the development of their AI lab. His latest book, which is just out, is entitled The AI Savvy Leader: 9 Ways to Take Back Control and Make AI Work. I look forward to speaking with him about those 9 ways and a variety of other insights he might provide. David, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Thank you, Peter. Happy to be here.
Maybe we can begin with the genesis story for you with artificial intelligence. As somebody clearly who's been involved in technology for some time, I imagine it's not a recent development for you. How did you get involved in artificial intelligence now to the point where you're writing books about it and have expertise in the topic?
Yes, that's a good question because a lot of people have an opinion about AI right now. So where does my opinion come from? I've always been interested and intrigued by the developments in just computers. So I'm still from the generation when I was a university student. I graduated in 95 and the internet only became public in 94. So we were intrigued, of course, by computers because most of our teenage years, we never had a computer. We didn't work with it. So I've always followed it up. And as a behavioral scientist, so I started as social psychology, organizational psychologist, did my PhD in behavioral economics, and then followed a lot of courses on computer coding and artificial intelligence later on. So I always had the desire to bring all of this together. But as you know, in the 70s, AI went into winter and we started to wake up. And I'm saying we, as an AI community, we started to wake up again when the big data entered early 21st century, and especially since 2015, you could say. COVID accelerated this, and now everything has exploded in terms of AI. I always wanted to bring this all together: behavioral science, economics, business, and computer and artificial intelligence. So now is the time. And I started to notice that the time was there when I was a chair professor at Cambridge University, because Cambridge University has a unique ecosystem in terms of how do they bring research? They have the most Nobel Prize winners in the world. How do they bring it to impactful solutions? And they have something that is called CAMFAN. It's the Silicon Valley of Europe, you could say. It's amazing how many professors, how many companies base themselves there. You have so many startups. So it's such a buzzing environment. So when I was a chair there, suddenly I felt like, wow, it's happening. I can bring all of these things together. So that led to my first book in 2020 on leadership by algorithm, where I brought in really my management knowledge. How do you lead, run companies? How do you take into account business? And how can you make it more efficient? And this led me to explore management in artificial intelligence and leadership in artificial intelligence. And now with the rapid acceleration where you see that companies are now being confronted with adopting AI, but don't know how to create value out of it because it's early days as well. Of course, we don't have those data. What is it really going to bring? We only have predictions. Even the best consultancy companies will make predictions. It's just like AI is probability. Much of these predictions are probability as well. We don't know. So I felt like, wow, this is the time to bring AI really into what is it that business leaders today need to do to make AI work for them. Because at the moment it's chaos, there's overhyped, there's AI industry that is just overselling to get more investors involved. But at the end of the day, we all don't know really.
I wondered also, how do you use artificial intelligence to your day-to-day work, especially perhaps generative artificial intelligence?
It's a very good question. Being in a business school university, obviously we're being confronted with an older system where we graded essays, papers. Now this being generated by AI, and AI cannot detect AI. So as a dean, I've made the decision very clearly: students can use Gen AI, because now what used to be final product where we graded students on is the input today, your essay, what you generated. It's a transition that's happening in the classroom from content, which is generated, and that's what we use to grade, to knowledge. So as professors, as teachers, as educational institutions, it's our job now to say, okay, great, you can use AI as a tool because that's what it is. And in education, as business students who will be business leaders, can you use it as a tool to make better decisions and actually elevate yourself? So a transition from content to knowledge is also about making it self-relevant, purpose-driven. What is it that you want to achieve in business? And that is still a human activity. So as we say, you use AI whenever, but in the classroom, it's moving to discussions. That's where the human brain matters in developing that kind of critical thinking. What are you going to do with the tool in itself?
And how did you use it in writing the book? There's at least a passage where you ask it a question and you provide the
Yeah, yeah.
response it gave you. But I wonder, do you use it in any of your writing these days?
No. So for the book, no, the book is really, no, I've written this myself. I went through the hard labor. Yes, when I've used ChatGPT, I also mentioned it very clearly. Hey, you know what? I've asked ChatGPT. Let's see what ChatGPT thinks, whether it agrees with me, yes or no. Also in my job, what we're seeing is business schools are starting to collaborate more with technology companies. The industry is extremely important. And for example, in my own work here at Northeastern, we have 14 campuses, which we call a global network. We're actually developing, so I may be saying too much at the moment, but we're literally developing where we integrate AI apps and conversational language, but real time, where we can have communities of students across our campuses internationally, where faculty where the dean can be represented by bots and provide certain information while not being there. So you still create a community. Because yes, I mean, with online teaching comes a global influence. And this is definitely a university where we also have, in addition to the online global influence, we literally have 14 campuses where we have students and faculty, and they also need to be included. So we're using AI that's a new project that we're launching as well. So.
You have worked, as I mentioned in your biography, in the UK, in Singapore, here in the US. You've spent considerable time in China. You are Dutch. You've lived, you told me, on 4 different continents. I wonder if you could talk maybe just briefly about some of the differences you've seen in the different cultures in which you've lived and their adoption of or appreciation for artificial intelligence, David.
Yes, lived in 4 continents, speak 5 languages because you have to adapt. So that's already one thing of a global traveler. And we have the digital nomads now. Huh? So more and more people will be traveling and working on different places. Adaptation will still be a very important skill. I just want to emphasize agility in the future. We don't know which large language models are going to be there in 5 years because everything advances so quickly. One thing we can do and help you with and teach you is agility and adaptability. So I think it's extremely important to be focused on the outside world, see what is happening in the US. We may say at the moment, hey, you know what? What happened after COVID-19? Is there truly globalization? Well, you know what? I can tell you there's re-globalization happening at other places in the world already right now, and you need to keep your eye on the ball. So that's definitely one message. What I've learned myself is really, yes, cultural differences exist, but for me, culture is really the behavioral displays. At the end of the day, most people want the same things. We just express it differently. We may take decisions in a different way to achieve the same thing. We may communicate differently about it. For example, some countries are very direct in their communication. I was born in Belgium. I also have Dutch roots. So we're very direct in our communication. So people had to adjust here to that as well. But I use it basically as a management tool, transparency, where people had to adjust to. So after a while, you become very aware of what are strengths, what are perceived weaknesses, and how do you balance that in getting what you want, basically. So it's been my experiences, the more you've been in different countries, not necessarily I've lived in another country for 20 years, but just exposed to different cultures and different countries helps you to become much quicker adaptable, but also seeing how you can stay yourself and negotiate within that context to stay yourself. So that's been an amazing adventure, and I think a skill that everyone should have. With respect to artificial intelligence, There are differences. So you've referred to my Center on AI Technology for Humankind. So we did several surveys in Asia, comparing it with the West, and some interesting findings where Asia is actually, most countries there are more willing to experiment more quickly. So we know in China, it moves fast. Of course, there's a centralized government, which makes these data are easily accessible or, I mean, demanded. There's no choice in that sense. But that also makes, of course, things can move much faster if the government supports it. So certain innovations will happen quicker. But also in Asian societies, people are much more willing to experiment and be part of that experiment, to say so, that they have to use the technology. You may remember we had self-driving cars, but then in California a few years ago, they said, like, we don't want to do that anymore. We don't want to put it out there. Whereas, yeah, in China, in Singapore, they will keep doing this because they push the risks a little bit further. That's one difference. Second difference was really in terms of data management. Because they go so quickly, their data management is less developed as in the West, I would say, in terms of like regulations. Yes, they have regulations very strictly, but among companies, data sharing, they're less likely to share than in the West. And I think it does have something to do with the pace. I know people here complain about, okay, too many constraints, not enough innovation. Huh? We're hindering innovation. But there's always something that I like to call, and I mentioned this in my book as well, as a human trait that AI should not constrain, is reflective procrastination. In my feeling, the discussion on creativity, especially now AI can generate so much, has focused too much on it's a process and it can happen quickly. But in reality, the real creative, innovative ideas are the ones that are unique and rare. So how you get there doesn't matter. It's, can you create those moments that you really find that creative idea? And then humans don't work consistently every day, generating the same amount of ideas and evaluating them the same day. That's what a computer does. Humans sometimes come up with ideas that have been working in the back of their heads. And suddenly, by, I don't know, an encounter with someone else who says something, it happens. So reflective procrastination is there. So I like when I saw those data that sometimes it goes very fast in Asia, but is it really then the innovation or the really big breakthrough that will happen? And sometimes it goes slower in the West. And that's fine sometimes, because on the longer term, I don't see any disadvantages of that. Let me put it this way.
Really interesting reflections. And I can see already these ideas and how they've impacted your writing in your latest book, The AI Savvy Leader. In the book, as is noted in the subtitle, Nine Ways to Take Back Control and Make AI Work, you highlight these 9 ways. They are learning, purpose, inclusion, communication, vision, balance, empathy, mission, and emotional intelligence. And it's funny, it was only that when I got to the conclusion of your book that I recalled just my reflections on looking at the table of contents before digging into the book, a point you raised, which is you may have even scanned the table of contents of this book, here I quote you, and thought these are just core leadership skills. You say, you're right. The truth is, AI savvy leaders are just good leaders who work on their core leadership skills and apply them with specific techniques in the context of revolutionary technology. And it's interesting, none of those 9 are technically centric. They're not even AI specific, but rather advice to humans to lean into those aspects that make us human, complemented by what AI can do for us, which I found particularly interesting. And so I wonder, maybe just a brief reflection. I'd love to dive. I've got some questions for you on some of the 9 in a moment, but as you reflect upon your own learnings, clearly you do see the power of AI working with humans, and but that it's the human first and AI second. Isn't that seems like a thread you pull through the book?
Yes, yes, yes. And that's where you see the parallel with what you just mentioned. People are sometimes surprised, hey, is this a tech book or a leadership book? Well, it is a leadership book, because the first big surprise for a lot of people is leadership behaviors that were effective in the past are still going to be effective today. But because people imagine, oh, with AI, everything's going to change, so we have to reinvent the notion of leadership as well. No. Yes, you need to have some tech understanding. That's why I call it the AI savvy leader. Because the biggest challenge today is, can you as a leader, with the adoption of AI in combination with a human workforce, create the value that is needed? And value can be, yes, more innovative, being more competitive, generating more revenue, but I see value also more holistically. because the general idea, the original idea of AI was to elevate humanity. So AI is there to elevate human intelligence. Artificial intelligence is not there to replace human intelligence. That was never the intention, nor should it be the intention, because AI on its own and humans on its own will be suboptimal compared to the interaction between both. So there's no reasons to think like this, but what you see in the business world, the perspective is still because most business leaders do not understand AI because it's very recent now, the push into adopting it to business. So they sideline, they have fears, but they also have a sense of urgency, a fear of missing out because everyone's doing it. So what happens? You delegate right away everything to tech experts. Are tech experts trained as business experts? No, they're not. So as a business leader, what you have to do today is two things. You need to be the alignment between the organizational purpose, which was always the case. What is it that you want to achieve? Serve the stakeholders, mobilize and motivate your workforce to achieve that. But you need to make an alignment with an understanding of AI as part of that new workforce. And this is a challenge for most people because they have to learn about something that at the same time they have to adapt to. And that induces a lot of fear and a lot of sidelining. And the result is that most of these AI adoption projects fail. Upscaling is extremely difficult. We see all the pilots, they work, but the upscaling is much more difficult. And the real value is only achieved when you can upscale, because the real value of technology is a J curve. It's not plug and play an immediate value. Never. It has never been. And it's the same with AI. So as a leader, then you need to understand it's a change management process. So many of these leadership behaviors that have always been effective in change management processes are, of course, important now today as well. But now you have to learn to use AI to make that change happen, which means be savvy enough. And what is being savvy enough, actually? Being savvy enough means understand the strengths and weaknesses of an AI and understand the strengths and weaknesses of a human. When I teach 1 hour on that, most business leaders suddenly already realize, oh, but then I need AI, but then actually I don't need AI. Once that awareness kicks in, you're becoming savvy. It's not about coding and understanding literally the model underlying under every large language model. No. It's really about this is what my workforce today can do very well. Can I improve on that? And can I adopt it in a way that resistance will be low? Because, of course, people resist change, where people can trust that technology, where I can create room where they can experiment with it. Because no AI model is perfect from the first try. It's a feedback cycle that is needed. So you need to install trust. You need to install room for experimentation. Suddenly, AI adoption becomes an inclusive leadership act. Everyone needs to be involved. You need to tear down silos because tech experts need to talk with business experts. They need to collaborate. They need to find room to exchange feedback and move forward. Now, this is interesting. That's leadership activity, no? I use the word exclusive AI adoption because many of these things are involved and you need to learn to communicate. And that's where your AI savviness comes in. Business leaders today, the biggest thing they need to know about AI is that they're savvy enough so they can create their own narrative where they understand enough about AI so they can talk to a tech expert and say, look, these are the business problems we need to address. This is why I think we need to use technology to address these problems. And now I can delegate it to you. Now I've made it clear to you so you understand what the business problem is, how it relates to technology, and you do the execution. And this is what most business people have to learn is you're not there for the execution. And this is what I've observed when they sideline, they're not part of digital transformation projects is because they don't feel experts in the digital or in the AI. But that's not your job. Your job is to deliver it up to the tech experts and at the same time make the business experts part of that process as well.
Very well said. You talk about a prevailing belief among some that artificial intelligence is superior to human workers. You note that this could lead to our losing out on unique human abilities like creativity and emotional intelligence. And I wonder, as you think about a lot of the concerns about AI taking over jobs, I wonder, where do you stand as you think about the medium and long-term implications of this?
Well, I think this is an important question to address and keep addressing it because, yes, to your point, there is a certain belief in the business world. Again, because they don't understand it. They're not being trained. If you think about it, most people in the top executive positions, when they were trained, when they had their education, issues like AI, sustainability, they were not in the curriculum. So it's a big challenge for them already to understand. I mean, one of the biggest problems in the US and in the corporate world worldwide is our boards don't understand anything of it, but they do have to govern us. There's a lot of challenges awaiting us, but that means because they don't understand what is it that we hear all the time. We get all these positive messages. And I'm also an AI optimist because I do believe being an AI optimist is actually also being an optimist about humanity because we have to use AI in the right ways, again, to elevate humans. So that should not contradict. But many people believe it contradicts because the only thing they hear is all the investments need to happen. When Sam Altman said, I'll put in $50 billion a year, no matter what, it's clear where the focus lies. AI first. Humans apparently don't seem to matter most. So if you don't understand AI or you don't see that kind of thinking behind it, what is it what you think as a business person? Oh, what I'm thinking of is I need to cut costs. I need to optimize efficiency and productivity. You think in terms of automation. Whereas the reality is, like I said, the value is created in augmentation. Humans first, AI second, AI in service. AI is a tool. How do you use it? And when do you use it? So every business leader, the first question they should ask themselves, is AI the right tool to address this problem today?
Yeah, you also draw an important insight from Gary Kasparov, who was famously a grandmaster in chess, who was defeated by Deep Blue in a series of tournaments in 1996 and 1997. He said, quote, machines don't have understanding, they don't have a purpose, as you note. And you say that suggest that it's important, in fact, you dedicate a chapter to it on defining a purpose. Leaders and not AI should ask the questions because technology is neutral, you note. Talk a bit about that, finding that purpose and defining that purpose and using that as the helping to define how best to use AI.
Yes. So remember, I said earlier, the task of a leader today is to be the alignment between understanding the organizational purpose and understanding the technology that can help you achieve that purpose. So what purpose means here is first, when Garry Kasparov and he and I, we published several papers. Actually, next week we have a big event here at Demore McKim where Gary will be there because he was the first human, as he always says, to lose his job to a computer. So coming back to the job replacement, the purpose meaning there is AI researchers will know this. AI doesn't think. It doesn't think like us. So comparing artificial intelligence and human intelligence is like comparing apples and oranges. They don't think like us. Although most people who don't understand AI will say, oh, but isn't it based on our brain? Yes, but if you understand that only scientists understand 15% of how our brain works because it's so complicated, it's very hard to make the argument that AI models our brain completely. We don't even know how it works. So don't compare it. Both have their function. And when we talk about purpose, it's like, is this something worth striving for? Is this something worth achieving? When you start a business, I assume you have a purpose. Why is it that you want to have that business? The why question. The why question, and this is what I mean with neutrality, because there's a whole discussion, is AI neutral? Well, as long as it doesn't have a self-reflection and it's not really thinking like it does, it doesn't fit that. That's artificial general intelligence and superiority. It doesn't fit that definition. So at the end of the day, like I said earlier, we do decide why we want to use AI to elevate what we find important. So that's purpose driven because that purpose that we know that's important to us humans or as a humanity can help you to address the right questions. So if I say, this is really important to me, Peter, when we work together, we're going to strive for that, then we also know as both as humans, oh, those are the questions we need to address. If we then go to a data analyst, for example, and say, hey, can you help us address these questions? Oh, the data analyst will say, finally, you tell me which question to address because now I can tell you whether we have the right kind of data or not. This is the garbage in, garbage out principle. But again, as you can see, most business leaders who are not trained, they are afraid to talk to a tech person because they don't have the narrative, because they don't have the savviness. They're not able to introduce what the business question is. So they only say, what do our data say? And then they say, oh, that's what our data say. And then they adjust to that. Now you don't have an organizational purpose anymore because you're being led by the data you have. The point is you ask the question still, so you need to have a purpose. And this is also important because you have to remember one more thing that I always like to emphasize is when it comes down to decision making and especially purpose driven, it matters to the people who are active participants in the society we live in and the business world we work in. Is AI an active participant? No, AI is not a human interacting literally with someone. It's not part of a culture. It's not part of norms. It's not educated in this. The best example is there's on LinkedIn, you can see a picture circulate of a light tower of like, let's say 4 meters wide. And on one hand, you see the head of a cow sticking out. On the other side, you see the back of the cow. And AI is being asked, how many cows are there? And it says one. One cow of 5 meters, 40 centimeters long, because it sees the front and a back. You are a human, and because you participate in reality and understand what reality is, you'll say, well, those are at least two cows, because there is no cow on this planet who is 5 meters, 40 centimeters long. This is, for me, the simplest illustration of why AI is not an active participant. Hence, who asks the questions? Humans. Go back to ChatGPT, it's still the same. No matter how amazing it is, you need to ask a question and you need to interpret the content.
Very interesting. In your chapter about balance, you note the importance of business leaders to get their customers buy-in relative to artificial intelligence. And you further note that customers are the first recipients of AI's potential advantage. Can you talk a bit about some of the customer advantages you see?
Well, of course, advantages are, I mean, what we see already with service bots when they work, of course. And I always say this is only the first line of information provision to companies because sometimes they do think, oh, we've done our job. There's no human anymore. You can't take the human out of the loop if you want to keep a customer happy today. Let me put it this way right away. But service bots, they can provide information. If you look at it, Peter, in terms of what is happening in smaller startups and how they want to apply AI, there's a boom happening today, literally today, on the use of bots now, where they will put information about specific information. They can make it custom tailored to your company, to a person, by feeding it all the data they have about that person or that company. So that's perfect because for potential clients, a customer to get to know your company, your products, your service, or whatever, these bots are perfect to provide the first information. Now, today, in 3 generations, this may change, but today, people want more after that. So in a way, bots are there to filter whether are you really interested, bring in the customer and then bring in the human in the loop. So you provide further tailor-made, but also human-directed service. And like I said, most companies now think, oh, we just replace. This goes back to my earlier point. They think in terms of automation, whereas it's augmentation. You see it a lot in financial services, where I always jokingly say banks started off with personal treatment was important into connections because they wanted to have your money so they could give loans out. Today, you have to be extremely wealthy to see a person even providing you bank service. So it has changed, but I'm not sure this is the way to go, to be honest. But again, an augmentation perspective is really needed there because customers also, they still decide on your reputation. And also with everything online now, they provide now reviews right away, real time. So that's extremely important that, yes, automate because that's what they expect, but at the same time, put it in how you're going to keep the human in the loop and what the human is going to do with customers. Another thing is also that you need to understand that with AI adoption itself, and that's one of the biggest challenges today for companies, is we are adopting AI, which is a change management project. Now we understand that. That means a lot of things are happening. But at the same time, customers will still expect the company to provide at least the same level of service as before the change. So balancing that is extremely difficult within the company. Hence, this goes back to, of course, your leadership needs to be in place. You can't have just tech experts driving your AI adoption because you've got your customers out there who may say that's all fine that you're adopting AI and you're promising all kind of better service and more advantages. But today, I still want to be served and be respected as a customer. So finding that balance is a big challenge. So business leaders are a crucial part of an AI adoption process.
Great points all. I mentioned in the outset that you've been a member of EY's advisory board, and I'm sure this has given you reason to think about the impact that AI will have on the services industry generally and the consulting industry more specifically. Can you talk a bit about what conclusions you've drawn through the thinking you've done there and the advice you're providing?
Well, it's a recent position. So what we're looking at is really business and society. So what are the trends? What is happening? What are the potential impact? And that's important. As you know, it's always important to be proactive. But with the AI thing, it's what I've learned is that although everyone talks about it, it's going to change everything. I mentioned this earlier in the conversation, overhyped. Yes, we can be confident, but to be honest, most of us don't know where the story is going to end and what its real impact is going to be. And I don't want to scare people about this. But the reason why I'm saying this and that this is an important point is that it's a step-by-step process. But if you listen to the tech companies who need investors, of course, we're living already in a futuristic world. And that leads to discussions like, is it an existential threat? Oh, last year, stop everything, stop the engines for 6 months because it's getting out of hand. And my take on these things is that I have no problem how fast AI science develops and how more we get to know about it. There's no problem there. There's never been a problem in history with knowing more. The issue is how to apply it and how we're going to use it. And that still comes down to a human decision. So when I say AI ethics, everyone thinks about, oh, technology itself has a moral compass, maybe, or how do we put it in? How do we code it in? What's the model? How does it emphasize it? Because it's also biased like humans. It's not just technology AI ethics. AI ethics is also a collaborative effort between a human and an AI, because at the end of the day, the human has to decide how to use the powers of an AI. And that just means in a business school setting, for example, as a dean, I say, our students need to be trained in recognizing just moral dilemmas, being aware of that, thinking about it, reflecting, having the philosophy, which is nothing to do with technology, because you need to have that skill yourself because you're deciding how to use it ultimately. And that's the same thing with how we're going to use our AI and what we can expect from AI and the impact on society. We love to talk in the abstract and we love to talk to investors, but at the end of the day, we need to look at our own responsibility and what it is that we want to do with it. And that discussion needs to be moved to the forefront. And this is not going to inhibit innovation or lead to more stringent regulations. This is an awareness process that we need to have. And this may sound very educational, what I'm saying here, but that's part of why I believe that people like myself and many others have to keep writing these books. People like yourself have to get these messages out there because there is an educational process for everyone at a societal level.
David De Cremer, thank you so much for taking time with me. Again, the book is The AI Savvy Leader. Thank you so much for sharing some perspectives from it and for the contributions you're making through its writing. And I really appreciate the thoughtful conversation we've had today.
Thank you, Peter. Also enjoyed it, and thanks for having me.